In 1964, the Civil Rights Act was signed by President Lyndon B. Johnson and passed into law. However, the state of Alabama was far from being compliant, and in 1964, Alabama was considered the most segregated state in America. And black people were still being blocked from registering to vote. So in January, King and the SCLC were invited to help amplify efforts to register black voters. Meanwhile, Malcolm X, who recently announced his split from the Nation of Islam prior to making his pilgrimage to Mecca, where he would convert to a more orthodox version of Islam. Shortly after his return, at a speaking engagement at the Tuskegee University, Malcolm would be approached by SNCC members Faye Bellamy and Silas Norman. They would invite Malcolm to come speak at the Brown Chapel AME Church the following day to address a group of young civil rights activists. And although Malcolm and King would have a brief encounter on Capitol Hill a year earlier, King would be in a Dallas County jail as he was arrested days prior for illegal parading along with 250 other demonstrators. He would, however, hold a private meeting with King's wife, Coretta, where Malcolm would assure her that he was only there to show support and had no intentions of trying to hinder or undo any of King's works. Malcolm would address the AME Church, where he would deliver his famous and now legendary House Negro vs. Field Negro lecture to a packed and extremely receptive audience.
I'm not intending to try and stir you up and make you do something that you wouldn't have done anyway.
The following day, after King would be released, he was quoted as saying he believes Malcolm was coming into a greater understanding of the nonviolent struggle. Malcolm X would be violently murdered in New York City just a little over 2 weeks later. By the end of February, 3,000 protesters had been arrested in Selma, Alabama. On February 26, just 5 days after the assassination of Malcolm X, Deacon and activist Jimmy Lee Jackson would be shot and killed while peacefully protesting by State Trooper James Bernard Fowler. To defuse and refocus the black community's outrage, Reverend James Bevel, who was directing SCLC's Selma voting rights movement, called for a march of dramatic length from Selma to the state capital of Montgomery. Now, for those of you who don't realize how far the distance is between Selma and Montgomery, we're talking about 50 miles. It's about 50 miles from Selma to Montgomery. So James Bevel, after Deacon Jimmy Lee Jackson was murdered, came up with this great idea that, we're going to show them by walking from Selma to Montgomery on a 50-mile hike. Now, a 50-mile hike alone is bad enough, but we're talking about 50 miles through the most treacherously racist towns in America. But okay, the first march took place on March 7th, 1965, led by Bevel, but was ended by state troopers and county posse men who charged on about 600 unarmed protesters with batons and tear gas after they crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge, headed toward the direction of Montgomery. The event became known as Bloody Sunday. One of the group's leaders, Amelia Boynton, was beaten unconscious, and the media publicized worldwide a picture of her lying wounded on the bridge. 2 days later, King would accompany them on the second march. This time, when they would meet with local law enforcement, instead of continuing on, they stopped to pray and afterwards turned around and left. This was all based on a prior agreement between King and Lyndon B. Johnson by way of Leroy Collins, former Florida governor. The third march, Lyndon B. Johnson was forced to federalize the Alabama National Guard for use as an escort for the marchers, which might have had something to do with the wall of Jewish financiers and supporters that King had insulating him throughout the march. That would have been a lot of lawsuits for Alabama, to say the least. By the time they finally arrived to the state capitol, The demonstrators had swelled up to a whopping 20,000. The march would turn out to be a star-studded event with celebrities such as Sammy Davis Jr., Dean Martin, James Baldwin, and Harold Belafonte, as well as many more who would show up at Alabama's Capitol. Shortly after that, Lyndon B. Johnson would sign into law the Voting Act, and black people would be voting Democrat ever since. But it was in Alabama during that time, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. would meet an ambitious 23-year-old man from Chicago named Jesse Louis Jackson. Peace, y'all. It's your brother Jay Blak, and welcome back to another episode of Agent, the series where we profile certain individuals along with their activities that clearly show agent-like tendencies and, in most cases, outright agent actions. Tonight's episode is titled Jesse Jackson, the Heir Apparent, and it will be broken down into two parts. Part 1, we'll be discussing Jackson's time with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and his true relationship with Dr. Martin Luther King. And in part 2, we'll be discussing his time in Chicago as well as political aspirations. Let's get into this.
COINTELPRO ain't dead. Don't think you screaming black power, putting in work for the people and not getting watched. Shit, it's agents in here right now. You might not know who it is, but we gon' speak to them anyway. Follow my lead. Yeah. Somebody in here's an agent. Somebody in here's an agent. Just say hi, FBI. Just say hi, FBI. Yeah. Somebody in here's an agent. Somebody in here's an agent. Just say hi, FBI. Just say hi, FBI. Yo. Somebody in here's an agent. Somebody in here's an agent. Just say hi, FBI. Teaching black people. Just say hi, FBI. Yeah. Somebody in here's an agent. Somebody in here's an agent. Just say hi, FBI. You don't think they got that? Bye bye, FBI. Yeah. Somebody in here's an agent. Somebody in here's an agent. Just say hi, FBI. Just say hi, FBI. Shit. Somebody in here's an agent. Somebody in here's an agent. Just say hi, FBI. Click, clack, bye bye, FBI.
Agent, a person who acts on behalf of another person or group, or a person or thing that takes an active role or produces a specified effect. So, basically, you can be an agent working for the police, or you could be an agent working for an agenda. It could be your own agenda that's separate from the agenda of who or what you're working with. Copy? Or you could be a person or a thing that takes an active role and produces a specified effect. So that's, like bleach would be considered a cleaning agent. It's a thing and it produces a specified effect. Copy? Jesse Louis Burns was born October 8th, 1941 in Greensville, South Carolina, to Helen Burns, an 18-year-old high school student, and Noah Robinson, her 33-year-old married neighbor. A year after Jesse's birth, his mother married Charles Henry Jackson, a post office maintenance worker who later adopted Jesse. Jesse would take his stepfather's surname, and although he maintained a close relationship with Robinson as he grew up, he would refer to both of them as his fathers. His ancestry included Cherokee, enslaved African American, Irish plantation owner, and a Confederate sheriff. That's an interesting combination to even name like that. And I'm wondering which side was which, where was which. Was it the Cherokee and the enslaved African American on one side of the branch, and was it the Irish plantation owner and the Confederate sheriff on the other side? Or was the Confederate sheriff messing around with the Cherokees, or was the Irish plantation owner creeping with the enslaved African American? But anyway, let's continue. Jackson attended the racially segregated Sterling High School in Greenville, where he was elected student class president, finished 10th in his class, and earned letters in football, baseball, and basketball. So Jesse was just an all-around All-American with it. After graduating from high school in 1959, Jackson rejected a contract from a minor league professional baseball team so that he could attend the University of Illinois on a football scholarship. So Duke could have really been a professional baseball player, but he'd rather play football. After his second semester at the predominantly white college, he transferred to North Carolina A&T, a historically black university in Greensboro, North Carolina. Jackson said he changed schools because of racial prejudice prevented him from playing quarterback and limited his participation on a competitive public speaking team. Although the University of Illinois previously did actually have a black quarterback before Jesse came along. But anyway, while at A&T, he was taken under the wing of Dr. Samuel DeWitt Proctor, who at the time was the president of North Carolina A&T, who was a member of Sigma Pi Phi, or the Boule, and a mentor and friend of Martin Luther King Jr., although it would still be a couple of years before the two, King and Jackson, would officially meet. At A&T, Jackson played quarterback and was elected student body president. Jackson was initiated into Omega Psi Phi, one of the Divine Nine Black Greek organizations. He joined the Congress of Racial Equality, or CORE. He became active in local civil rights protests against segregated libraries, theaters, and restaurants, resulting in his arrest, with his activism constantly being highlighted in the Greensboro Daily. He had been getting so much press from the Greensboro Daily that other protesters began to notice and note that they were seeing him in pictures at protests that he didn't even attend. And concerning his arrest, which was also highly publicized in the paper and became the catalyst of his civil rights career, in the book, Jesse Jackson, The Man, the Movement, and the Myth, written by Barbara A. Reynolds, on page 38, Reynolds states about the claims that Jesse led to demonstrations in Greensboro that led to the desegregation of the main library and restaurants. However, a search of police reports, interviews with attorneys who handled the desegregation cases revealed that there was no record of Jackson ever being jailed in Greenville. And relatives of Jackson stated that he was away in school during the Greenville protests. Allegedly, it would be this arrest that would gain the attention of North Carolina Governor Terry Sanford. Impressed by the young activist, Governor Sanford appointed Jackson to the North Carolina Intercollegiate Council on Human Rights during Jackson's final year in college. Sanford would go on to serve as an advisor and mentor for Jackson, sponsoring Jackson as one of the first African-American delegates to the Young Democrats National Convention in Las Vegas. So you see, the man was making some serious connections early. We're talking about the governor of a segregated North Carolina, Terry Sanford, decides he's going to take this young, aspiring civil rights activist and put him under his wing. You following, right? Okay, cool. And although he was initially planning on staying and working under the governor, his ambitions took him elsewhere. He graduated with a BS degree in sociology. In 1964, Jesse Jackson would move to Chicago on a Rockefeller grant to attend the Chicago Theological Seminar. Now, you got to follow the money and see who's funding these guys a lot of times. So for those who don't know what the Rockefeller grant is, it's a grant that was established in 1913 by John D. Rockefeller Sr. So, I mean, technically, he's funded by the Rockefellers. Technically, but that's a technicality, though. The Rockefeller Foundation primarily supports projects in health, ecosystem, livelihood, and urban transformation. Applications for this grant are by invite only. So you can't just say, I want the Rockefeller grant. You have to actually be picked for this particular grant. Jackson's sponsorship would come by way of his mentor, Dr. Samuel DeWitt Proctor. So the president of his school at A&T took him under his wing and mentored him, as well as the governor of the state. Clearly, there was big plans for this young man. And when Jackson arrived in Chicago, he would be introduced to Mayor Richard J. Daley by arrangements of North Carolina's Governor Sanford. While attending a theological seminar in Chicago, Jackson would meet David Wallace, who would be instrumental in facilitating relationships between Jackson and several fundraising institutions. I mean, this white boy had a serious knack for cultivating relationships between black churches, specifically. Wallace would also go on to be considered an archival scientist and leading expert of the 60s civil rights movement. Jackson would also meet Gary Massoni, who would also become a lifelong advisor of Jackson's. In March of 1965, Jackson, with a few of his college friends, particularly David Wallace and Gary Massoni, drove to Selma, Alabama to help assist in the voter registration drive. He would arrive just shortly after the Bloody Sunday fiasco, and there he would meet Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Reverend James Bevel. Jackson, who was eager to join the SCLC, would approach King about joining the ranks. And although King was concerned about Jackson's apparent ambition and attention-seeking, when Jackson returned from Selma, he would be charged with establishing a frontline office for the SCLC in Chicago to help assist with the establishment of the SCLC's economic branch, Operation Breadbasket in Chicago. Back in Chicago, Jackson would quit the Theological Seminar of Illinois just 3 classes shy of graduation to join the civil rights movement full-time. Talk about a leap of faith. He got the grant to go to this school so he could be an ordained reverend, only to leave just 3 classes shy of graduation so he could be a full-time civil rights activist. I mean, talk about a leap of faith. But hey, sounds pretty commendable, doesn't it? It will be Wallace and Massoni who would help Jackson establish the Operation Breadbasket branch in Chicago. Without them two, he wouldn't have been able to establish that office, which was how he was able to prove himself to Dr. Martin Luther King. And just a year later, in 1966, King would pick Jackson at the request of Bevel to head the Chicago branch of the SCLC economic arm, Operation Breadbasket, which was established by Jackson, Gary Massoni, and David Wallace. The operation would serve as a job placement agency for black people, and in 1967, he would be promoted to its national director. Under Jackson's leadership, a key goal was to encourage massive boycotts by black consumers as a means to pressure white-owned businesses to hire blacks and to purchase goods and services from black-owned firms. So basically, instead of implementing some of the do-for-self plans employed by Marcus Garvey or Elijah Muhammad, the plan here was to force white business owners to employ black workers through boycotts and protests. Jackson would be a protege of King and Bevel, and although King would publicly praise Jesse for his work on Operation Breadbasket, according to his biographical profile book titled Martin Luther King Jr., written by Marshall Frady, King became frustrated with Jackson, feeling like Jackson was following his own agenda rather than supporting the group. And in 1968, shortly before King's death, King would critique Jesse about this, and the two would fall out. Although the two would have somewhat of a reconciliation, as King would invite Jackson down to Memphis at the request of James Bevel. According to declassified FBI files, the Memphis police had recently infiltrated the Black Power organization, the Invaders, which was a movement working under the umbrella of the Black Organizing Project. The Invaders, who were invited by King to assist in the sanitation strike, which would bring King to Memphis that early April 1968. Now, the Invaders and King had a very tense relationship, but King had engaged the group in an attempt to bridge the gap between nonviolent movement and the more radicalized youth. And to ease tensions, King would even invite a couple of members of the movement to stay at the Lorraine Motel during his fateful stay. However, a heated argument between the Invaders and the SLC erupted, and they were asked to leave the motel by members of the SCLC the evening before. And the following evening, April 4th, 1968, just shortly after 6 p.m., while King will be awaiting to be escorted to dinner to his close friend and colleague, Reverend Billy Cowles, he will be addressing his inner circle when a bullet will hit him in his right cheek, piercing his medulla oblongata as it exited through his neck. King would be immediately rushed to the hospital, and in that Memphis hospital, 1 hour later, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. would perish. According to the declassified FBI files, it states, Robert G. Jensen, the special agent in charge of the Memphis field office, and Joseph Hester, case agent for Merkin. Now, I'm figuring that to be a code or an acronym, Merkin, which is interesting, M-U-R-K-I-N, like Murder King, but okay. Have unequivocally assured the task force that there was no electronic surveillance of Dr. King in Memphis. So, while King was in Memphis with all the FBI surveillance that had been on King, there was no electronic surveillance. They wasn't doing no tapping, no video recorded, no wiretapping or nothing. Very interesting, and it appears that they cut off the electronic surveillances. Anyway, let me continue. It was explained that Memphis was not in the mainstream of Dr. King's SCLC activities. However, FBI agents did observe the sanitation workers' strike activities for intelligence purposes, and the Memphis Police Department and confidential paid informants did supply information to the field office. Our investigation disclosed that there were 5 paid confidential informants providing intelligence regarding the racial situation to the Memphis field office on a continuing basis. The intelligence coverage provided by these individuals related to the activities of the Nation of Islam, Black Students Association of MSU, Students for Democratic Society, Black Organizing Power, Black United Front, Afro-American Brotherhood, Invaders, and the sanitation workers' strike. There is no evidence that the activities of these informants related directly to Dr. King. Moreover, there is no evidence that would suggest these informants were connected in any way with the assassination of Dr. King. I found it odd that they would note that the informants were not connected directly to the King assassination. It sounds like they're suggesting that there was already a plan by the FBI to assassinate Martin Luther King, and they're saying that these 5 informants weren't a part of that plan. That's what it reads to me, but I could be wrong. Let's continue. The Memphis Police Department infiltration of the Invaders. In addition to the paid informants, an officer of the Memphis Police Department infiltrated the Invaders in an undercover operation. The officer, who was later exposed and is no longer with the Memphis Police Department, was interviewed by the task force. The undercover assignment began in February of 1968 for the specific purpose of infiltrating the Invaders, who became active about the same time of the sanitation workers' strike. According to the officer, the Memphis Police Department was primarily interested in the Invaders, not Dr. King, because the Memphis Police Department was concerned about what they might do. The police officer, in fact, accepted as a member of the Invaders and participated in their activities. On the evening of April 4th, 1968, when Dr. King was shot, the informant had been on a shopping trip with Reverend James Bevel and Reverend James Orange. Now, let me rewind this real quick. On the evening of April 4th, 1968, it says the informant. So they're not talking about the police officer now. Now they're speaking about an FBI informant. Notice how they changed the language, right? Check. And it says that the informant had been on a shopping trip with Reverend James Bevel and Reverend James Orange. The informant said he returned to the Lorraine Motel at approximately 5 p.m. and was standing in the motel courtyard at the time Dr. King was shot. Initially, I had thought that the informant and the police officer were the same person. Initially, because it didn't really make it clear that they were now talking about a different person. And the undercover officer was later revealed to be Morrell McCullough, and further research showed me that Morrell McCullough was in fact shopping with them. Well, he was the driver. He was in fact driving Bevel and Orange around that day when they went shopping. So initially, I said, oh, okay, that's a no-brainer. It's Morrell McCullough. He's the informant and the cop that they're talking about. However, McCullough was not standing in the courtyard when King got shot. He was on the balcony. So right then and there, I realized, okay, they are in fact talking about two separate people. But the way it reads, it's hard to actually distinguish that, except for the fact that when they're talking about the police officer, they mention police officer. When they mention the informants, they talk about the informants. Now, do you think they would intentionally write that in a manner to throw you off or to make you believe that the police officer and the informant are in fact the same person? But if McCullough is not the informant that Bevel and Orange went shopping with earlier that day, even though he drove them, he was not the informant that the feds were talking about, who is?
And I started crying, and then I heard Jesse Jackson say, he told me, Jesse, take our people on to the mountaintop. And that didn't bother me, even though I know Jesse got nowhere near him. And then Jesse said, I held his head in my hand while he died. And that didn't get to me. And then Jesse said, look at my shirt. And I looked around, sure enough, and Jesse Jackson's shirt was drenched in blood. And I realized the only way Jesse could have gotten that blood was stoop down on that floor at the Lorraine Motel and rake that blood off that floor and put that blood on him. And I went crazy. I really tried to kill Jesse. They grabbed us and all that, but that hurt me so bad. The other thing was, when Abernathy came back, says, no need of prayer, no need of cry, no need of nothing. He is gone. It's over with. He's gone to glory. And we called the meeting, the staff meeting, and Jesse claimed to have been ill. And Abernathy told him, Jesse, go ahead to the room and relax. Jesse had to have run like hell that room into that airport because he got out of Memphis to Chicago. All us feeding, everybody was still in the motel. Cut the televisions on the next morning, that was Jesse Jackson in Chicago with that same bloody shirt on, telling that same lie. I've never respected Jesse since that moment.
So there we hear Hosea Williams explaining how they all was at the meeting and Jesse said he wasn't feeling so good. So Abernathy told him, go and get some rest, Jesse. And when he turned on the TV the next morning, Jesse was in Chicago. But what was not mentioned was, how did Jesse manage to leave Memphis and make it to Chicago before the morning? Or the real question should be, who actually arranged Jackson's exit from Memphis when after the King shooting, everything had been shut down, including all forms of transportation in and out of Memphis? And that next day in Chicago, Jackson would declare, I come here with a heavy heart because on my chest is the stain of blood from Dr. King's head, he added. He went through literally a crucifixion. I was there and I'll be there for the resurrection. So we can clearly see Jesse is positioning himself as King's successor, even insinuating he's going to be the resurrected version of Dr. King. In a recent interview, Don Rose had this to say about Jesse Jackson. Almost immediately after returning to Chicago, Mr. Jackson was making the case that his youth and energy made him the logical person to inject new life into the movement rather than somewhat stodgy old members of Dr. King's inner circle, which I thought was very ironic because throughout Jesse Jackson's entire career from that moment on, Don Rose did everything in his power to make Jesse to appear to be the clear heir apparent of Dr. Martin Luther King. At least once publicly, he indicated that he was the last person to speak with Dr. King, and he had held his bloody head as Dr. King lay dying. Others who were there said it never happened. Jesse's account changed from over time, from cradling Dr. King's head to reaching toward it. And this really pissed off the people in Dr. King's inner circle, especially Abernathy and Williams, who were actually right there. They were the ones who rushed to King's side while he was shot and resented it because they kind of looked at it as some calculated grab to seize the spotlight, placing himself as the successor when really he was, if there was a totem pole, he was all the way on the bottom. You couldn't even see him. He was the post inside the dirt when it comes to the hierarchy of the SCLC in 1968. James L. Ray, who was a fugitive who a year prior had just escaped from prison, would be charged for the murder of King, but only after fleeing to Canada, then to London, where he was captured at a London airport trying to flee to Angola a few months later in June. I am very curious to where was he getting the funding to make all of these moves. Keep in mind, this whole time, he's still a prison escapee. We'll talk about him in a whole nother piece. Let's continue. Now I'm gonna wrap it up on the King assassination. Although I could be here for hours talking about just this incident alone. And if you wanna get a real good in-depth detail of those accounts and the FBI's memos and information, the late and great brother Steve Coakley did an excellent job. You can find his videos on YouTube where he really details the assassination of MLK. I would really advise you check that out. A lot of what I was able to do here is based on what Steve Coakley had laid down already. Now, I'm sure most of y'all watching this are familiar with the March 1968 memo from FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, who explicitly called for the Bureau to prevent the rise of a black messiah who could unify and electrify the black militant nationalist program. Furthermore, in that memo, it mentioned Malcolm X as being the martyr of the movement. It mentions Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. as being a possible threat if he chooses to abandon his nonviolent position for a more black nationalist stance. It mentions Stokely Carmichael saying that he was a major threat due to his charisma and ability to unify people in the movement. It mentioned Elijah Muhammad, but it noted that although he's a potential figure, he was considered less of a threat because of his age. And although Fred Hampton was not named in the original 1968 memo, he later became a primary target of these COINTELPRO goals before his assassination in 1969. But if the FBI was making all attempts to prevent the rise of a black messiah, who's to say they didn't create one? So Jesse Jackson, the activist, steps on the scene in the early 60s as a student, leading sit-ins to demonstrate against the segregation laws of North Carolina. During which time, he's arrested for a sit-in at a library, although there's no records of this arrest. Nonetheless, after this arrest, the governor of the state, Terry Sanford, took a profound liking to Jackson to the point where he took him under his wing and began to mentor him and sponsoring a 21-year-old Jesse Jackson to attend the 1961 Young Democrat Convention in Las Vegas, where Jackson would be the youngest black attendee ever at that time. Mind you, not only is Sanford the governor of a segregated state, but also this is before the signing of the Voting Act by Lyndon B. Johnson. So there was no black loyalty to the Democrat Party at this particular time. In fact, several Democrat politicians were actually segregationists at that time. During which time he was attending A&T University, where Dr. DeWitt Proctor, the chancellor of the university, would also take on a mentorship role in Jesse Jackson's life, who would then sponsor Jackson for a Rockefeller Fund to attend the theological seminar in Chicago. And keep in mind, Proctor is also seen as a mentor of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., but never seen for the two of them to meet. Well, at least not till after the murder of Malcolm X. So clearly, they had big plans for this young man. Clearly. Where just a month after Malcolm would come to Selma, and 2 weeks after his assassination, and just in time to miss the Bloody Sunday debauchery, but yet still make it to the victory lap down in Montgomery with his two homeboys, Gary Masoni and David Wallace. In Alabama, he meets Dr. Martin Luther King and James Bevel, where, according to most accounts, he demands they give him a position at the SCLC, where it was said that he showed up acting like an organizer as opposed to a volunteer. Jackson, Masoni, and Wallace would then go back to Chicago and develop their own chapter of Operation Breadbasket under the SCLC. And within a year later, Jackson would be named the National Director of Operation Breadbasket. His positioning himself as King's successor after King's assassination, making at least one public appearance with King's blood on his shirt that he placed on the shirt. And according to the FBI memo, Reverend James Bevel and Reverend James Orange had went shopping with an FBI informant that day. Who was this FBI informant that was mentioned? And then there's the fact that in the immediate aftermath of the King assassination, the city of Memphis was on fire. I mean, it was rioting and looting. The mayor, in fact, called a curfew and locked the city down. There was no in and out transportation from or in and out of Memphis. But yet somehow, Mr. Jackson was able to make it from Memphis that evening and into Chicago. Who arranged for this? Was Jesse just some ambitious young activist whose ego put himself over the movement? Does his relationship with people such as Governor Terry Sanford, or even his relationship with someone like Press Secretary Don Rose, show that he in fact is working for some type of government agency or in the interest of some government agency? These are just some of the questions we will be tackling, and we will also be discussing some of the business practices practiced by Operation Breadbasket, Jesse Jackson's connections to the street gangs of Chicago, and how all of that is related to his connection with fallen Black Panther chairman Fred Hampton, Jackson's international moves, and of course, his political affiliations, all on Agent Jesse Jackson Part 2, The Chicago Years, which will be dropping very soon, so please stay tuned, and thank you for watching.
COINTELPRO ain't dead. Don't think you screaming Black Power, putting in work for the people and not getting watched. Shit, it's agents in here right now. You might not know who it is, but we gon' speak to them anyway. Follow my lead. Yeah. Somebody in here's an agent. Somebody in here's an agent. Just say hi, FBI. Just say hi, FBI.